Hello, and welcome to Coffee and Contemplation, and thank you for joining me for today's review. But first, let's enjoy some coffee. So first thing, I want to just go over what I'll be doing today. First, we'll just look at today's review. Briefly, I'll be going over modular housing versus modern housing, and I'll talk a little bit, with my limited experience, what I think about both, and what I think in the future sustainable solutions in both conditions could be. And then there's an innovative company, Boxabl, that I've been paying attention to for a while, and they have a blueprint. It's called the Boxabl Casita, and I'm going to be doing an overview of that blueprint as well as providing a video example. They have on their YouTube good resources to check it out further than what I'll be providing in this video. From the Casita overview, the blueprint, I felt inspired to show what my ideal gaming unit would look like inside that blueprint with some minor adjustments because as you'll see later, it actually comes as a very strong foundation. So it's like what my ideal gaming unit would look like. I have a blueprint for that. And then what my ideal dining unit would look like. And I'll be providing a blueprint for that. As well, I just have some points to consider that I think that Boxabl does a good job of already addressing. But when it comes to modular housing versus modern housing, and how what's going on right now is unsustainable and needs to be addressed, whether it's at the level of like resource allocation, resource management, or at the individual level resource utilization, I think that both modular housing and modern housing need to be addressed. It's like homelessness is increasing. At the same time, it's becoming more difficult to rent and even more difficult to own. And so if something doesn't happen in either of these domains, which I think Boxabl is actually doing the best it can for the modular. But yeah, anyways, first let's dive into modern housing a little bit. In my experience as a pro gamer, I moved and lived in different cities as part of my career. I grew up in Utah and sort of middle class neighborhood. I think we were mostly renting, occasionally to own. But then when I was on my own, mostly my housing was managed by my teams. And so first I moved to a large home that was too large, arguably, in Arizona. And then I moved from there to San Jose in much too tiny of a space. 3 people for one studio bedroom apartment, for example. And then from there back to home in Utah. And then renting my own place in Southern California. And then back to my home in Utah. It's just my own personal experience, but it's honestly been really chaotic to navigate. And if it wasn't for the wisdom of others, I don't know how I'd be able to navigate it, quite frankly. And I think that that's why certain phenomenon for the younger generation are increasing, whether it's homelessness, hopelessness, drug addiction. I think all of those things are connected to this housing crisis. And so modular housing has had a history, but never has it been approached at a level where I think it could provide solutions at the foundational level, whether it's these individuals who are struggling on the street, whether it's the individuals who are struggling to rent, whether it's the individuals who are struggling to own. I think by reflecting upon, as haphazardly as it may be, the modular housing crisis as well as the modern housing crisis and how you can address both of those things at the level of structure, function, and organization. So, like, to me, I just play video games all day long, but Fortnite is a building-based game, and I'm exploring how to efficiently build within that simulated space. Then, when I explore independently how traditional, even modern American infrastructure and architecture is gone about, I don't think it's very efficient, and I don't think it's well ran. I think that there is wasted resources at every level of analysis. And so I think, just like in video games, in the context of building in Fortnite, you can do certain things to make your buildings more efficient. I think that at the level of a commercial market, I imagine that there's also certain efficiency steps that you can take, make it so that, and I think that Boxabl actually addresses that. So they're making modular housing units that are 19.5 feet by 19.5 feet that are stackable, as well as you can organize them in a courtyard layout depending upon how much land you have. I haven't seen another company present an option so attractive to me, so for now, while I gather my thoughts going forward, let's watch their video example of their Casita unit. It's a 360 square foot house, essentially. And I don't know what sort of governmental legal red tape they're having to go through, but as far as the current modern projections, once their factories are completely up and running, this seems to be the most attractive option for people of my generation who are trying to be independent or start a family or start a business. Just provide a good, solid, stable, sustainable roof over one's head. And with how... Anyways, let's just jump right into it. I'll get into my thoughts later on. So, coming in from one of the main door entrances, you can see that the doors are actually still pretty tall. You don't feel claustrophobic. And even just from this camera angle, you can see a lot. A fully stocked kitchen with good cabinet space, sink, a center entertainment station, and I actually like how they have on the stock model the rotating TV. I think that their base model, it fits the criteria of ideal resource allocation, resource management, and resource utilization. The windows are great. It allows a lot of natural light and the option for ventilation depending upon climate. The walls, I don't know the specifics of the materials they use, but I know that they're going for strength and efficiency, and based on what I've seen, it actually looks very durable. Mini washer is good. In the bathroom, it's actually fairly comfortable. When I was first exploring this company, I couldn't believe how much they fit in a 361-foot area. But I think because the ceiling is pretty high, at the same time as the base layout is well structured, it's pretty realistic that it could be a home worth investing in, especially as a launching off place. And the company design is really good for that, because with the box model, you can either stack on top and put adjacent and have connections through the doors, or in a courtyard design, place it elsewhere on the property with like a central open space. And so I like how the entertainment station has some storage space, shelf space. They really managed to address every little bit of what one may need, at least as a launching off point for a home. And so here you can see it's marketed for $50,000, which if you compare that to trying to own property in modern times right now, it's absurd. But like my dream would be 10 acres, empty lot, low cost to land, get a well, get some internet, get some affordable modular housing that is good, true, and beautiful as I start a family and my family grows. So can my property in a way that's controlled. I mean, I grew up playing Legos, and essentially this is just adult Legos. It's an attractive option to me. I think that the base Casita model is actually excellent, but there's some slight design changes that if I were to get 1 unit or 2 units, it's how I would approach it. So haphazardly, I went over the modern housing situation as well as the modular housing situation, talking about how it's a crisis currently, and I don't think that we're on a sustainable trajectory. And then I tried to talk about, from my point of view as a pro gamer, how modern housing, there could be solutions just at the level of individuals utilizing resources better, and then people managing those individuals, and then higher up getting good, true, and beautiful materials sourced locally, ideally. So modern housing could improve. At the same time, modular housing has to be an option, inevitably, in my eyes. I think that as homelessness increases, as it becomes more difficult to rent, as it becomes more difficult to own, you need some form of modular solution mass manufactured. And in my ideal scenario, it's not to stack these Boxables up like an apartment building in some tyrannical way. It would be for everybody to, in my ideal scenario, to get their own little bit of land and then learn to still participate in commerce and everything like that, but then they'll have something they own and can build upon. And I actually think that Boxabl is providing that option, or trying to provide that option at the level of modular housing. At the level of modern housing, I don't have much to say. I think it's down to the brokers, real estate agents, building manufacturers, and just, I don't know the inside baseball. You have to have foundational level of every part of the game to be able to participate in modern housing properly. And personally, I don't have the patience nor the interest to navigate that. That's why, for me personally, modular housing optimized in a good, true, and beautiful way would be the ideal solution. So, with all of that said, let's explore the default Boxabl Casita model. So you can see 19.5 by 19.5, a main entrance, a back entrance, just like we saw in the video. I think the doors being aligned, it makes it feel larger than it is too, because if you have something in your front yard and something in your backyard, whatever it may be, you have access anytime. At the same time, windows being in alignment gives you good airflow options, at the same time as natural lighting options. I think the bathtub is cool. I think sink space is good enough. Bathroom space, good enough. Bedroom and entertainment station, having that rotating TV, just by default, I think is really smart. It's going to hit the regular market who either plays console games or watches entertainment rather than participating on a personal computer or virtual reality system or something like that. This is default design is going to be excellent. Has fridge, freezer, oven, space to eat, some cabinet space as well above. I think that great design. Now, for me as a person who derives most of his meaning through the practice of video games, the improvement of video games, and sharing the experience of video games with my friends and family, this wouldn't actually be my ideal layout. If I had no other option, I would love this. But now we'll just go into just a couple different thoughts I have accommodating the pro gamer lifestyle, for lack of a better term. So, first and foremost, as a pro gamer, I'm going to care about Ethernet ports and Ethernet access. You'll see that I readjusted the kitchen, and we'll go into that. But essentially, I'd want my Boxabl or my modular housing to be well connected for modern times. So you're not reliant upon just Wi-Fi. You can have a direct connection. And then, so yeah, we'll go over some of the changes. I think that for me, in my ideal, what we're going to be going over is my ideal gaming unit. I still would want the exact same bedroom layout. Oh, exact same bedroom layout. I think that's good, true, and beautiful. I like the TV layout. That's also good, true, and beautiful. Personally, I used to have a lot of arthritis problems in esports or just in general through overtraining or repetitive strain injury. And I've found that whether it's just hanging on a bar or doing pull-ups slow and controlled or trying to go until failure, pull-ups are incredible asset to gamers. And I think that you could install a sturdy pull-up bar inside a unit. But then at the same time, so you'd free up a lot of space in the entertainment area for one PC setup or virtual reality gaming setup. And then you'd free up the kitchen space. Instead of having a second sink, you'd have one in the bathroom. Instead of having a second sink, as well as, if we look at the default blueprint, cupboard space, you free that up for a second gaming setup, whether it's a second PC, or if you had a PC and a virtual reality setup, you'd be able to just have one in one cube of the area and the other in the other. So in my ideal gaming design, there would be PC 1, PC 2, whether it's a virtual reality or a PC is up to you. And then there would be a minimalist fridge and freezer, just for stuff that's already prepared, or if you're going to restaurants or what have you, or you do food prep alternatively and you just want it stored, you don't have to do a lot of cooking. Then you can have your little dining area as well as your fridge and freezer, as well as some cupboard space perhaps. And I think it would be worth investing in these sorts of units, some form of reverse osmosis water filter just by default. Because then you have your water, you have your food, and your whatever it may be that's already prepared for snacking. And this would be ideal for a gaming experience and training from my point of view. When you want to take a break, you can hang out on the pull up bar or do your workout protocol. You can do a lot with body weight. Like imagine a yoga mat here as well as a pull up bar. Suddenly you have a full body maintenance and improvement protocol. Alternatively, you have access to go outside, and that's where you can really do fitness training protocols. But I think that this layout right here would be my ideal for a gaming unit. In addition to a gaming unit, I had a thought that there could be a dining unit, especially if you were to have multiple boxes, multiple modular homes. Then you could have a courtyard style layout where you have one central dining box, and then modular home housing options, whether it's casitas or whether it's optimized in one way or another, stacked in one way or another. This could be a place where food prep is done and handled locally in a way that is good, true, and beautiful. I have a lot of food sensitivities, so I have to cook all the food I eat, and it's incredibly frustrating when you have to jump through a bunch of steps to get cooking comfortably. And I actually think if you had an isolated, modular, dedicated unit that was a kitchen, it would be easy to maintain. And let's just jump right into the blueprint. So this would be my ideal dining unit. So it'd be a combination of a dining space as well as cooking space. So you'd maintain the bathroom from the initial layout. Instead of a bed, you would have a dining table as well as a large trunk freezer. Say, for example, you want to store a lot of meat or you want to store other things that can be frozen. This would just be extra storage space for that. I think it would be pretty cool. And then you still have one Ethernet for console access or virtual reality access, whatever it may be, PC access if you want to connect it to your TV with a laptop. And you keep the TV station as is with the same cupboard space. You keep the entertainment station as is. It could be up to the individual, whatever they want to do with this in the dining hall. Like for example, if you're going to be providing food for a large number of people, it could be a second table instead of a couch and a coffee table. But then we look at the kitchen space and it's different. Instead of having a shower in the bathroom, you expand that to be pantry, cupboard, or food storage. And then in the kitchen, you double the cooking space, whether it's you have two ovens with extra. There's people who are better at the actual design of utilizing the space, but like my concept was literally just double oven, double frying space area. And then, yeah, I think that by taking away the shower, you would free up a lot of room for pantry, cupboard, food storage, whether it's fridge and freezer or just pantry storage. And then, so for the dining unit, my bullet points were fridge and freezer, trunk freezer, and then also just a regular fridge and freezer, and then cupboard and pantry optimized. And then again, just like the gaming thing, I think it's going to become more and more important to just make sure that especially if you're selling a modular unit, I don't think it would be that much more expensive, and it would be so much better for everybody's health to just make sure that the best top of the line water filters were provided in every single unit. And people wouldn't even notice, but by participating in that commerce, if you had a reverse osmosis water filter in every single unit you sold, you'd be improving everybody's health at an unconscious, like under the surface level. People wouldn't even notice, but I think that it would be worth investing in if you're already investing in so much at the level of quality and efficiency. So for a dining unit, this is basically all I would want. Good relaxation, entertainment space, good actual dining space with a trunk freezer, reduced bathroom space so you have the essentials, and then another dining space slash cooking space. I could see myself using like a cutting board on this table or something like that. And then you have your washing station, your cooking station. Anyways, let's go back to today's review. Yep, we went over modular housing a bit. We went over modern housing a bit. Now, we went over the Boxabl Casita fairly extensively, both at the level of blueprint and at the level of video example. Then we went through my ideal gaming unit, which was just a few thoughts that I had if I had control of the layout, and then my ideal dining unit. And so last, I have a few points to consider that I actually think apply to both modular and modern housing, And I think Boxabl is addressing many of these points already in their modular design. But these are just some points to consider that I think if you wanted to have housing conditions that are good, true, and beautiful, whether modular or modern, these things apply. So, first point would be passive design. Implement passive design principles that maximize natural ventilation, daylight, and insulation. This reduces energy consumption and keeps the house comfortable year-round. So I already pointed it out. The fact that the doors are in alignment or the windows are in alignment, those are passive design principles that maximize natural ventilation, daylight, and insulation. And so they're already nailing it, the Boxabl thing. And then at the same time, if I were in control of a modern housing situation where I built my own house and had the land, I would make sure to keep that in mind. So for both modular and modern, passive design applies. So then this one, more or less, I would want enough land so that it applies to both, but let's just read it. Modular design. Create a modular design that allows for easy expansion or adaptation of the house as the family grows or needs change. This approach respects ancestral practices of flexible living arrangements. I really like that. So it's either have enough property and then have the wherewithal to, in the modern context, build and expand, or utilizing a modular design, you can just free up space for your own creative endeavors and your own production, and then rely upon the modular design as well as your own land to achieve the sort of courtyard layout that I think is ideal for at least me. So then we'll go into courtyard layout. Design the house with a central courtyard or open space, which is common in many cultures. This space can serve as a gathering area and provide natural lighting and ventilation to surrounding rooms. I just think that that doesn't even really need to be explained. It just intuitively makes sense. You would want to not feel cramped. You would want to feel in a welcoming place, and from time to time it would be cool, whether it's just a park where you can read a book or some outdoor gym, some other thing that you could design these modular houses around. I think it would be very good. The next point would be multi-generational living. Consider multi-generational living arrangements, which are often traditional in many cultures. Design spaces that accommodate extended families while ensuring privacy and independence. So, it's more and more difficult to do this in the modern situation. And I think that if you have some innovative practices on your own land, then with the modular approach, multi-generational living will be easier to approach. Say, for example, you had a loved one who you were responsible for, who you wanted to take care of, but you still wanted them to have their own space and their own privacy. There's almost nothing better than a Boxabl Casita that you could offer. And you could also customize it, whether you needed it to be handicap accessible or whether you needed a hospital bed for at-home hospice care. All of these things you could do using the modular design, and it's increasingly difficult to do it in the modern context. So I think that Boxabl, they already address passive design, modular design, of course. I think it's dependent upon the individual to use the courtyard layout, but I think that they provide a great platform for it. Multi-generational living, you could make the same argument. Boxabl doesn't inherently provide multi-generational living, but depending upon how the consumer uses the product, multi-generational living could be actually near idealized from my point of view, utilizing their product. And then sustainable technologies is the next point. Integrate modern sustainable technologies like solar panels, rainwater harvesting, and energy-efficient appliances to reduce the environmental impact of the house while preserving cultural values. I think that goes without saying. As we become better at resource acquisition, management, and utilization, we should be in tune with nature and try and be respectful in all of those categories. And I also think the reverse osmosis water filter in combination with the rainwater harvesting is a genius idea. I don't know how they would do it, but say, for example, you had state-of-the-art reverse osmosis water filters in every unit, and the unit has a tank that, depending upon climate, is mostly filled from rainwater excess, and then you have it go through the filtration system, and you make it simple to replace the filters as need be. That would be just amazing. And so then, traditional building techniques. That's the next point. Explore and revive traditional building techniques that have been passed down through generations. These techniques often have inherent sustainability and efficiency advantages. So, regardless of what culture you look at, there's different forms of modular, efficient, traditional good, true, and beautiful housing scenarios. Like, for example, Japan has a quick turnover in their housing market where they're constantly rebuilding, replacing, refurbishing. And I think that there's things that you could learn regardless of what culture you were to choose to look at. Even um, hunter gatherer people who still had to maintain housing but were constantly on the move. Stuff like that, I think, is attractive and is more and more difficult to solve at the modern level, but it is becoming more and more easy to solve at the modular level. Say, for example, as a pro gamer, I wanted to have an East Coast training center. You buy land, marginal land, you have a modular home, and good connection to the server. Then you have a private place to train and a private place to compete if it was an East Coast based server. Then vice versa, if you wanted to train on the West Coast and participate in a West Coast based server, you'd have the same thing, marginal farmland that you just make your own, comfortable modular housing, good connection, and then you'd simultaneously have the option to train and participate in modern commerce from the West Coast or the East Coast. At the same time, the price of both of those together is probably less expensive in the current market than trying to buy a single 5-bedroom house in any major city or something like that. And so I think that that kind of goes into the next point, land use efficiency. Optimize land use by incorporating efficient space planning and landscaping that provides food or resources, such as gardens or fruit trees. So I think that this goes hand in hand with traditional building techniques as well as sustainable technologies. All of these things compound and eventually create a good existence. And I think that it's becoming difficult to own enough land in modern circumstances to have a large house as well as optimizing space for garden and fruit trees. It's possible and you can do it, but it's a much more difficult game than marginal land and then modular housing with the modern connection and then optimizing land appropriately. Like, say, for example, on 10 acres, if you were to buy that at the same price as 1 acre in a city, then on that 10 acres you could have tons of fruit trees, lots of garden space, space between your modular houses. I think that for me personally would be a much better outcome. So then the last point would be cultural ritual spaces. Designate spaces within the housing for cultural rituals, ceremonies, or religious practices, if applicable, to maintain a connection to cultural heritage. And so the way that this is framed and phrased might be a little bit confusing, but for example, I derive most of my meaning in the context of improving at video games or sharing that experience with friends and family. And those terms that I just used are almost by definition religious practices. And so we don't have to get into all of that. But for example, if I wanted to continue to practice what I do in a good, true, and beautiful way, I need proper living arrangements and proper spaces to do those things. That's why I went over my ideal gaming unit and my ideal dining unit, because in the context of a not particularly religious secular individual who plays a lot of video games as well as has other hobbies outside of the video games, I think that the combination of an ideal gaming unit and an ideal dining unit would be an excellent platform for growth. So then we've gone over the points to consider now, and we're coming close to today's review. Briefly, we'll just look over everything once more. In the tour, you can really see how they've thought out the lighting, and the ceilings are high enough that you don't feel like it's a prison cell. Not at all. And I think that a house shouldn't feel like a prison. But when I was forced to live in the... I wasn't forced, I chose to voluntarily. But, man, living conditions in certain cities in America can be brutal, tight. And I think that the way that they've set up the windows, the way that they've set up the doors, the ceilings, it's actually just a very good design. And I think that in the future, housing problems like homelessness or difficulty to rent, difficulty to own, will be solved by innovative individuals and then people who manage those individuals and then companies who manage the people who manage the individuals. And so it's like Boxabl is the first example that I've seen of that at the level of modular housing. And then in the context of modern housing, it's like, good luck, you have to learn how to play a very complex game to navigate it properly. But this is just simple and sweet, man. I think it's great. Yeah, well, thank you for joining me for today's review. This was a little unorthodox because generally my content is specific to actual games and gameplay, but you can't participate in games and have idealized gameplay without a comfortable living environment. And in modern times, fighting homelessness, fighting the difficulty to rent, fighting the difficulty to own, and then learning to thrive in the context of ancestral principles, or learning to thrive in the context of modern housing, learning to play that game, or learning to thrive using modular housing, all of those things can be addressed bit by bit through strategic analysis. And I'm just hoping that this sort of coffee and contemplation can contribute to the analysis, whether it's just helping me to formalize my thoughts. Anyways, thank you for your time and attention.